Hello, thank you for being here today. My name is Tyler McDaniel. I'll be hosting this Intro to Community Change Grants for Environmental Projects webinar. Today we're going to talk about the community change grants, sort of a high-level overview, but also give a little introduction to me, to the program that we're building at CEDIK around environmental justice, and talk just a little bit about sort of what goes into EJ, what it is, and how you can move forward in your community, and explore some of these environmental justice topics. So to get started, we will do a little intro to me. So, as I said, my name is Tyler McDaniel. There's a picture of me. I am the Environmental Justice Program Coordinator with CEDIK, the Community and Economic Development Initiative of Kentucky. And I've been in this role a little over a month, so we're kind of building out what the environmental justice program is going to look like in the long term. But the gist of it is that we at CEDIK, embedded in UK, are the Kentucky office of React for EJ, which is that nice little logo you see at the bottom there. And React for EJ sort of live within the Environmental Protection Agency's Region 4. So we are the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center, or TICTAC for the acronym, for the state of Kentucky. So essentially what that means is that we're going to be doing statewide technical assistance to support communities and organizations who are already doing environmental justice work around the Commonwealth. So we'll be helping with guidance on navigating grant applications and systems, developing strong proposals, brainstorming ideas, and trying to make connections on your ideas, to different resources, to other organizations doing similar things, serving as a facilitator within community engagement, or any sort of community meetings that you might need, and sort of helping build out some of those more involved environmental planning efforts. And then hopefully just connecting y'all with the resources for funding, best practices, some webinars, or even partnerships that are just folks in your backyard doing similar work, or maybe folks around the Commonwealth doing similar work, and trying to connect across geographies in that way. So there's my office phone number up there, and my email is also there. You may have already received an email from me, but feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have. And yeah, that's it for me. So to begin, you might not be familiar with the term environmental justice. So if you're not, here is a very long definition of it. I'm not going to read that to you, but essentially, I feel like environmental justice is sort of summed up by these sort of four little bullet points at the bottom here. And it really is a process that tries to center community planning and decision making in every stage, from design to like the community engaged work on the ground, as plans are coming together, into the actual implementation of plans that affect the environment. So overall, meant to counter sort of health impacts that come from environmental hazards or impacts, and sort of focuses on what is termed disadvantaged communities, which is admittedly kind of a loaded term, but that sort of factors in a bunch of different demographics that have to do with income, with race, and national origin, ability, other markers like proximity to certain plants, or maybe like an old coal strip job, things like that. So thinking also about kind of those, like the legacies of pollution, the legacies of disinvestment, legacies of racism that might have led to some of these things being placed in certain neighborhoods. And really just kind of all circles around the impacts of climate change on the actual people, or on climate change, but also on the sort of environmental impacts on the people who live around these spaces. And it's really just rooted in that idea that everyone deserves access to a healthy community. And not only in the present, but one that sustains in health, through their children and their children's children and through generations down the line of their neighbors and families. So, kind of some of the bigger or more targeted focal points of environmental justice revolve around things like air, water, and soil, and then kind of how those intersect with all these other pieces below. So the environmental hazards that can come from those, and whether that's soil contamination from air pollutants, or soil and water contamination both, or water and air contamination, like these things all kind of intersect in these ways of various impacts. And environmental justice, a lot of times, also focuses on the concept of climate change resilience. So, given communities, helping them build the tools and lay the foundations to make decisions for themselves that, you know, are not necessarily influenced as much by outside actors or uh, people who, might speak for everyone, but without asking everyone. And they also deal with the transition to clean energy, and then, especially here in Kentucky, and in sort of central Appalachia more broadly, the transformation of former mine land. So old strip jobs and things like that. And how can communities reclaim these spaces to be healthy and profitable and prosperous and, of benefit to the communities that surround them. Now, to get into community change grants, like I mentioned, this is going to be a pretty big, uh, you know, 5,000 foot, maybe not 5,000, we'll say like a 500-foot view of the community change grants. They're very robust. And a few years ago, there was $2 billion allocated from the Inflation Reduction Act. And that was for environmental and climate projects. So once again, these are community driven. Like I mentioned, to the idea of climate resilience, how we sort of build the abilities locally to tackle problems that only people in the places that they live know the answers to, right? This is a lot different than someone coming in from the outside and saying, "Hey, you have this problem. This is how you solve it." This is the community saying, "This is this thing that we live with, and this is how we are going to work within it to remedy it in ways that we feel and know are best for us as the people who live here." And they really the community change grants really prioritize those community driven initiatives. They want high levels of community engagement. And you're going to see that throughout each piece of this as we move through. And it is kind of a short window to apply. The applications are due on November 21st. Those are kind of just accepted on a rolling basis. Like it's just wide open until November 21st. The projects do have to be completed within 3 years. So as you think about your application and think about the process of implementing some of these projects, it will help to kind of frame it as a year one, year two, year three, as far as how you plan and you design and you implement all of these initiatives. And then there are two project tracks, and those are community-driven investments for change and meaningful engagement for equitable governance. And we'll talk a little bit more about those as well in more detail as we move forward. But once again, these are, for people adversely, disproportionately impacted by climate change, legacy pollution, historic disinvestments, and there are tools. I'm sure you might be wondering, like, do we qualify in that way? There are tools to figure out whether or not you qualify. They're pretty easy to use, and I'll walk you through an overview of those as well. So within the community change grants, and thinking about who is eligible to apply for one of these grants is at minimum, there has to be at least one community-based organization or a CBO. So essentially, the community-based organization It's like a nonprofit. Could also, could be charitable, it could be public interest based nonprofit that supports or represents a community within a certain geographic area or town. So whatever that community-based organization is, there has to be sort of a pre-existing relationship of doing work with that community and, preferably based in that community. Um, and these to be eligible, at least one community-based organization. So to lead the project, you could have two, but one of those organizations should partner with another CBO or a federally recognized tribe, um, a local government, which is pretty broadly defined within the the grant itself. So of course, that can mean like um, county, city, like municipality or parish. Can also include under the conditions of the grant, like a local public authority, like a public housing agency, or even a school district, like a local council of governments, things like that. Um, so local government is pretty broadly defined, but I would imagine a lot of you will probably operate within traditional governmental structures, and then also an institution of higher education. So your universities, your local colleges, community and technical colleges all around the state. So some one of these two combinations of those partnerships, and the partnerships can also sort of unfold in different ways. So it's sort of framed under this way of a lead applicant and a statutory partnership. And the two of those also have to sign a partnership agreement that kind of lays out all of the pieces that each person will take on. And you have a little outline of those two right underneath here. The lead applicant will do the overall management, the performance, the oversight, the reporting. So all that big stuff, right? And then the statutory partner will be more like the sub-awardee. So they're going to carry out the specific activities. So that might be, you're more kind of like boots on the ground, getting in the creek, doing the work kind of organization, whereas the lead applicant really helps provide that oversight, the reporting to like push everything forward within the stipulations of the grant to the federal government. And then within that, there can also be collaborative entities as well. So those will be folks who, may not have or may not be granted direct awards, but will sort of serve as partners to kind of facilitate and funnel resources into multiple parts of this, and whether that is through ideas or work in their labor, things like that. Now, to the idea of what is a disadvantaged community. So within this grant, a disadvantaged community is sort of defined within three ways that are listed right here. So it's geographically defined based on this Inflation Reduction Act disadvantaged communities map. And that's what this screenshot you see on the right here is. That is from, uh, well, it's Kentucky, as you can see. Frankfort in the top left, then Lexington, and then pretty much all of Eastern Kentucky over here that, is visible except for kind of this little strip up around Ashland, is considered a disadvantaged community. And that map is pretty easy to read. I mean, that's it. If it's orange, it's a disadvantaged community, and that is determined by a number of data sets that deal with census information based on income, demographic makeup, and then as well as some other sort of larger environmental screening tools that we'll talk about in the next slide. But this can kind of be your first stop to determining eligibility and pretty much using this map, which is hyperlinked multiple times throughout this presentation, and seeing like, am I orange or am I blue? And if you're orange, then you are considered a disadvantaged community and are applicable for these funds and likely others. There is also a disadvantaged unincorporated community. And so, without a sort of official governance structure, and then a farm worker community. So that is a community that might be obviously based around farming, around agrarian lifestyle, and has a lot of potentially like seasonal workers or seasonal economic outputs based on whatever they're growing. So, in addition to this sort of general map, another way to screen for this is this environmental justice screening tool. It's called EJ Screen, is also available online. And so, paired with that initial disadvantaged communities map, this is a tool where you can really begin to dive into the specifics of environmental impacts in the place that you live. So I just did a random sample of Paducah here, zoomed in on Paducah. And if you look at the map's contents piece on the right, you can see some examples of things that you can look at, as well as the selection tools on the left, which are much more broad. But these are just on the right, kind of the ones that I have selected offhand. And you can see the EPA RIA was the map we were just looking at to determine a disadvantaged community. And then this, I chose to sort of to highlight a couple things here are the proximity to a regulated facility, and for this one, air particulate matter. So you can see the breakdown of kind of those regulated facilities and what they are. So Superfund, hazardous waste, water discharge, air pollution, brownfields. And I think that kind of helps, give you an idea of the environmental landscape and what might be impacting or causing some of these things. And within this map, you can also begin to place like schools and churches, other, demographic data. You can look at proximity to grocery stores, health issues like asthma, heart disease, cancer risk. And you can really start to kind of draw some connections by choosing a few of these things and just and playing around with what is close to one another. And it can kind of help you begin to draw out a narrative of your place. Like I mentioned, I picked particulate matter for the air screening tools. And in this particular part of Paducah, it looks like there are a couple areas here that fall within the disadvantaged communities data set or qualification, and then the data set suggests that they are in the 90th to 95th percentile of high air particle, right? So from there, you can begin to say like, okay, this community has impacts related to air pollution, and you see all these kinds of you know regulated facilities around that neighborhood. And you can use this tool to begin to kind of draw out your narrative for the community change grant. And that community change grant does require kind of like a project area map so that to better illustrate the area you're working in and some of the impacts. Another cool thing you can do in this map that might help you in that narrative is you can pull out, it's called an EJ screen. And this is just a few slides of some examples of what that looks like. And these EJ screen reports are a lot longer. I mean, they're, I think, like 8 to 10 pages. And they essentially just pull a lot of the data together that tells you about the community. So once again, I selected that track, and you can see sort of a lot of the demographic data about it that would mark it as a disadvantaged community, particularly low income, over half people of color, pretty high percentage of people with disabilities, and a very low per capita income. And then as you move through that report, you can then see these really cool, or I think they're really cool, graphs that sort of illustrate how the local place compares to both the state and the national levels. So, just looking at this air toxics cancer risk portion here, you can see that it is in the highest 97% in the entire state of Kentucky and the highest 90% in the United States. So you can that piece and then these other more detailed pieces of this these EJ reports where you can really start to look at this value table as the local level, state, of course, national, and the percentages of each. And here you can really see where locally, those exact numbers and what areas they are higher or are lower. So I would highly suggest if you uh, intend to apply for community change grant or really any kind of sort of environmental grant that to use this EJ screen tool and to begin to pull and read that data. Now, within the community change grants themselves, once again, going back to these EJ focuses from the beginning, these are kind of the broader focuses, like I mentioned earlier. And then these for these more targeted expectations from some of this that would come from these grants. So, if once again the piece of climate resiliency, how we prepare and sort of take ownership over these environmental impacts. Uh, Thinking about heat, things like heat islands and extreme heat, I think we can all relate to it being pretty hot right now. Um, but that's also things like, increasing your tree canopy, curbing or replacing wood heaters, finding ways to mitigate against wildfire events, things like that, community-led pollution monitoring, prevention and remediation. Of course, air, water, waste, soil. Once again, how can we really equip communities with tools to begin to tackle these problems on their own? And there are a lot of different ways to do that, and you can see sort of the intersections here with some of that, like workforce development. Um, how do we, create avenues for people to become experts in soil testing or uh, green HVAC systems, things like that, and then investing in those low and zero emission pieces of that technology. And once again, that final point that kind of at the core of all this, once again, is facilitating that engagement of disadvantaged communities, in every step of the process. The government process for sure in decision making, but also in all these other pieces as well. And sort of giving people, more engagement and ownership and involvement over their local public health. So all these like big disparate ideas, in order to bring them together, there's sort of these two different application tracks that I mentioned earlier. You have the community-driven investments for change is track one, and track two, the meaningful engagement for equitable governance. So track one, communities can apply for $10 million to $20 million. So this is that, pretty steep chunk of change there.
Wow.
And these are large scale projects, they can be like infrastructure, like big dreaming infrastructure projects, development. They can be, once again, rooted in climate resiliency and preparation, sort of that disaster preparedness piece as well. But this is one where you can really start to dream big. And then track two, also pretty big, $1 to $3 million. And these are more engagement heavy with local communities. So building those capacities like of people in their place to join into the government processes. And we'll kind of talk more specifically about some tools that communities can use within those government processes and this track, as well as providing some examples for track one. And maybe you're looking at this and you're thinking like, wow, we could really use some infrastructure, some job development, but also like we would like more community engagement. Well, I have good news for you because you can actually apply for each track once. So you can do one application for each track, but no more than that. And it will be, a pretty lengthy application process, but If you have all those needs and you have the capacity to do it, then I would encourage you to maybe explore that option. So thinking about track one, community-driven investments for change. These are just some of the goals of this particular track. Uh, the two things that are most notable here, these first two bullet points on the left, increase community resilience with a climate action strategy and reduce pollution with a pollution reduction strategy. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute and what goes into that, but those two pieces are specific to track one and must include at least one of each. In all likelihood, your projects or your proposals rather will include multiple and they'll kind of intersect a lot. And that can be a good thing. And I would encourage you as you begin to brainstorm on this to really just start to look at each one of these strategies and start to fill in how your ideas might fit, how it might intersect, who the people are within each track, the people, the organizations, the community groups who can fill those needs and get your desired outputs and outcomes. And then these other three, once again, are some just some kind of things to keep in mind and some targeted points as you begin to write your drafts. So track one, this is sort of just like the breakdown of what the grant looks like. Now, I didn't include every single section in this, but just to kind of give you an idea of what you might be looking at as you begin to write this grant. This piece, the work plan, is paired with the executive summary and cannot exceed 20 pages. And it's admittedly is a lot. Part one has these four parts that are pretty geared towards, your community vision, making sure that all the community pieces are in line, that you're going to have a plan for how to engage the community, involve them in the process, and then be sure that they stay involved and that your outcomes live beyond year three of this grant. Part two has 5 sections. So that's more the program piece. That'll really be where you start to articulate your outcomes, how you're going to track and measure those, and to what degree all the organizations involved, what will they do within that? And then part three is readiness, feasibility, sustainability, which comes in 4 sections. And once again, demonstrating everyone's readiness, examples from the past of success stories or collaborations, things like that. This instruction at the bottom is hyperlinked, so it'll give you more detailed breakdowns of every single part and every single section. So back to those climate action strategies that we discussed before. These are the 8 climate action strategies with just like a couple examples underneath each one as ways that you could go within this. So remembering that in track one, you need at least one climate action strategy and one pollution reduction strategy. So the climate action strategies, as you can see here, they're very broad, right? You can have infrastructure and more nature-based solutions. Really thinking about public spaces or like sort of transforming different kind of like stormwater basins. And then these broader infrastructure projects as related to transportation, thinking about walking paths, bike lanes, and of course we can see, how some of that green infrastructure might intersect with something like that. Maybe it's a walking path along a sort of like stormwater mitigation project. And then, even low and zero emission like bus systems, like big infrastructure projects here. And then it kind of goes, dovetailing in and out of different levels, like the synergy efficient piece, thinking about retrofitting homes, for energy efficiency and also something maybe like lead abatement to improve community health outcomes. Microgrid installation for communities or, broadly neighborhoods, workforce development, of course. I think there's a lot of potential here to create a workforce around a lot of these things, particularly surrounding air, water, and soil, and how we continue to test and improve upon those. Waste reduction and management, brownfield redevelopment. So this is once again this grant cannot fund the cleanup of brownfield sites, but more so the revitalization of sites that have already been cleaned up. If you are interested in further brownfields redevelopment, we at CEDIK actually have a brownfield redevelopment program that is a partnership with the state, where we provide some more sort of technical assistance and community planning within those brownfield sites, identification and planning. So feel free to check that out on our website. And then also these kind of community resilient hubs that could be spaces that house a lot of this stuff, disaster services and education. How do you meet neighborhood needs? Maybe training residents to learn how to do soil tests and getting funding to ship those off and have the tests ran and things like that. So once again, at least one of these, but in all likelihood, you will have multiple that intersect. And the other required piece, the pollution reduction strategies. So there are four of these here, a little more targeted. So indoor air quality and community health, clean water infrastructure, outdoor air quality, and hazardous waste management. So these two things will, of course, feed into each other. As you start to think about resilience hubs that might do water testing, well, that's going to help your clean water infrastructure. If you have, litter cleanup or other types of like pollution prevention, or you're building out a recycling center, that can also be community resilience, the hubs, or these broader sorts of community health impacts. So those are that's kind of the quick of track one. And once again, there are hyperlinks throughout to more vigorously explore the qualifications of each track. And I've linked the notice of funding at the end that has the entire grant, as well as some other checklists and things like that. So moving on to track two, meaningful engagement for equitable governance. So once again, this is about increasing community engagement in those governmental decision-making processes. And I think that sort of central to the idea of environmental justice is that idea that communities have often not had a say in the environmental impacts facing their communities. And this is sort of helping them build the capacity to do that. And that could, be a number of things, right? I think particularly thinking about community advisory boards, involving community and budgeting processes, creating community benefits agreements, other sorts of civic engagement tools and mechanisms that could be involved in bringing people into government and into decision making. So some examples around this, once again, those advisory boards, participatory budgeting. This is also a good space for larger sort of education and training programs and initiatives. And, once again, thinking about that kind of air, water, soil framing is the most accessible. How do you educate folks about what goes into waterways, how we maintain healthy waterways, things like that. And then how do we develop plans to ensure that those waterways maintain? So this work plan over here is similar to the one we just looked at in track one, but is a little less involved. So there aren't as many, this area with 5 sections. You sort of have these 2, 3, 8 sections right here, and the broader instructions linked. This work plan is maximum of 15 pages, whereas track one is 20 pages. So once again, though, it's kind of asking you to articulate how your projects are linked, how collaboration and participation might happen, what the impacts, the outcomes are going to be. So Now, what is ineligible? Uh, it's a pretty broad grant, and there's not a lot that is ineligible. Conducting scientific research, assessment, removal, or remediation of Superfund sites, and permanent community relocation. So, with these being the ineligible activities, you may, depending on your grant, you may have to articulate how you are not going to do these things. So, I think one of the big really interesting pieces of this grant is that there is that property acquisition is allowed. So if community groups are going to acquire property to say, conduct or create a community resilience hub, then how they will have to show how that won't relocate a community. So trying to think about those impacts and how they might land here to knock you out of ineligibility, especially with such a broad scope of what you can actually do. So some considerations as you start to think about whether or not you want to move forward in this. Once again, 3 years to complete this grant. So thinking about that kind of year one, year two, year three uh, scope, right? As I mentioned, the applications are due November 21st, and then, oh, got a little trigger happy, uh, are due November 21st of this year. And then uh, folks will be notified and awards sent out um, next, I can't remember if it's March or April actually, but it's next spring. And then the actual work is set to begin that summer in like June, July. So it'll pretty much be from that kind of like summer 2025 through summer 2028 that you'll have to complete this phase of everything. Also considering, whether you and, all the organizations and entities and partnerships, do you have the capacity uh, to conduct this grant and these projects, but also, to get the grant finished in time for that November 21st deadline. And the partnerships and community input. With this being so geared towards community work, um, I would, consider that. Like, what relationship do your organizations have with community? Have you already done community work around a certain issue? Uh, and if not, like, can you, get going immediately? Start talking to people, holding public forums, getting impact input, things like that. And the window to apply. So it is July 2nd, and the grant is due in November. Um, so, a pretty short window, not impossible by any means, but considering all these things together, the capacity, the window to apply, and sort of the partnerships piece of it. Um, I will say I got some inside track knowledge that the majority of the applications thus far have not been funded for a couple reasons. One being a lot of them are kind of just like people want to plant trees without any sort of articulation of broader impact or like a reason why they might be planting trees. So once again, thinking back to that EJ screen map, thinking about what do trees do, what do they curb against, is it heat, is it health impacts from air pollutants, things like that. And the other reason that a lot of the projects have not gotten funded thus far is because of that lack of community planning and community input. Most of the projects have not to this point had a lot of engagement, have not fully articulated those kind of community relationships on the ground that are so central to this grant. So keep those things in mind. And next steps. Once again, determining whether your community qualifies using those maps that I mentioned and making sure that you have a registration on sam.gov and grants.gov because those can take, up to a month to fully go through. If you do qualify, who are your community partners? What does that look like? who's holding what work within that, and what are the areas of concern that you're really trying to work within. And if you are not ready yet, but you think, hey, we have some environmental issues in our community, um, contact me. I'm going to be here, you know, in perpetuity, uh, trying to help y'all out. So providing some technical assistance and helping you brainstorm and kind of move forward in the years ahead. If not around a community change grant, how can we begin to kind of think about these broader impacts and issues in your community and start to craft plans of action around how to tackle those. So please contact me. I would love to hear from you. There's a handy hyperlink in here where you can request technical assistance. And if you use that link, it will help me with tracking everything. So I'm open to email, but also open to the help in tracking. If you are really like all in on these community change grants, there are these two um, organizations here that can offer you specific technical assistance. So, Indina and the Environmental Protection Network. Those two are specifically 100% community change grant TA. So, I can be here in this process to sort of help get you off the ground, to make some connections locally, but, working across a lot of different areas, they will be able to give you more targeted community change specific help. And they are also here in this handy dandy helpful links section. Um, and here you will have access once I share this out to you, the screening tools, the grant itself, two other community change grants, PowerPoints, one from Environmental Protection Network, who, as I just mentioned, provide technical assistance, one from the EPA itself. And these checklists and six steps to apply are pretty helpful in making sure you're on the right track and that you have everything and kind of give you a step-by-step guide of how to do it. And they also recognize that this is a lot. So they do suggest you take a nap. And then the community change technical assistance at the end. And that is all that I have. I would like to open up, that's me again, and my contact information again. I'd like to open up the floor to any kinds of questions that y'all might have. Please feel free to just put those in the chat, and I will get them sort of in that Q&A section here. And it looks like we have one. In track one, where might energy efficiency efforts slot into reduction strategies? Thinking about city community upgrades of lighting, insulation, solarizing of buildings, facilities, homes. What would projects focused in this area be applicable? I know the focus is on air, water, soil, but not energy, but thought I'd ask. City officials are hesitant regarding climate action, but there seems to be support interest for energy efficiencies because of the cost savings benefits, along with the environmental quality of life benefits. Yes, I think, definitely that lighting, insulation, solar, those things all apply. Let me see, track one. I will try to go back here to find. So, I think especially here, like in the climate, we got the climate action strategies, and a lot of that really fits into, I would say, this energy efficient piece right here. So energy efficient, green infrastructure, potentially workforce development, and even some of that microgrid installation, because a lot of this is, it's reducing that environmental burden, which comes into community health. So reducing those harmful substances. And I would say that also gets into like, to air quality, and thinking about clean energy that kind of reduces fossil fuel emissions. And also like I I feel like the climate action pieces and the hesitancy is it can be a challenge for sure. But at the same time, we're working this fund of money, I think is pretty valuable for workforce development, for community health, for really thinking about how can we bring more jobs to the places that we live? How can we make them, the people who live here more healthy? Like I want my neighbors to be healthy and happy and have good jobs and um, beautiful places to live. So I think those are some of the benefits of this sort of beyond that idea of climate action. But I definitely think that solar, upgrading old lighting, things like that are definitely applicable. Another question, would rural, smaller communities be overlooked because of the number of people is smaller than a larger area? What are your thoughts? No, I do not think so. I think this money in particular is, I think, meant to this money and like this sort of broader tic tac network that my position falls under are meant to provide those resources to smaller communities who might be a little more resource strapped. And I think especially if you can articulate, like based on um, that disadvantaged communities map and some of those other impacts in the smaller communities, that it would, I don't think it would rule it out at all. Um, yeah, and it is a target of this money is under resourced communities, smaller communities. So, any more questions? Well, if y'all don't have any more questions, um, then thank you. Like the slide says, I'll give you about 10 minutes of your time back. I appreciate you coming out today. I know this was a lot of information that is only going to lead you to even more information. But like I said, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Email me down here. Reach out to us at CEDIK. Look into the Brownfields program. I will also be sort of in the days ahead sending out this slide deck as well as a recording of this webinar. So poke around those links, shoot me an email with any questions or things that come up. But oh, awesome. No, no, Madison, you're amazing. Thank you. Um, and the rest of you, you're all amazing. Thanks for coming. I appreciate you so much, and we will be in touch soon. Have a great rest of your day.